Hi, I'm Tommy Schnurmacher, the host of Chosen for What, a podcast by the Foundation for Genocide Education. What do? We take a deep dive into the personal stories of the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. Have you ever stopped to consider the hidden fears that shape the way you parent, or the quiet calculations you make about your children's safety that others might never even imagine? My guest today, Barbara Cieply, has spent years reflecting on these important questions. As the child of Holocaust survivors and mother of two sons, she knows firsthand what it means to carry the weight of generational trauma in the everyday choices of family life. Today, Barbara will share deeply personal insights into how her parents' legacy has shaped her mindset, her anxieties, her approach to motherhood. Barbara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tommy. It's great to be here.
Now, can you share the kinds of thoughts that would cross your mind about your son's survival if there were even ever another Holocaust-like event?
Well, I am a first generation. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. Both my parents were survivors. They're both passed now. And just in thinking about all these stories that have happened over my lifetime, there are a few things that really pop into my head that really, I think, really highlight what it means to be a child of survivors. For example, I was working at a bank and we had a little kitchen in the bank, in the branch, and I was sitting down. I was a young mother of teenage children, two teenage boys who were very athletic and strong, and I was very proud of them. And not for the reasons that most people would imagine, because I spent one lunchtime telling my colleagues who are not Jewish how I was so happy that I had young, strong boys. So if there was another Holocaust, they might survive as my father did, because the Holocaust started when he was 14 and he was a very strong young man and he managed by luck and wits to survive. And they all looked at me like I was completely out of my mind. And I'm like, you don't think of things like that? And they're like, no. So I went home and I called my younger sister, Arlene, and I said, she also has two boys and they were much younger. And I told her what had happened. And she said, I totally understand what you're saying. And in fact, I worry, but for the opposite, I worry that I have two boys and they might be identified as Jews because they're circumcised. So I'm wondering if maybe I should have had two girls, because maybe then they would have survived. And that was a totally normal conversation.
Now, how did you feel when you realized that your colleagues and friends don't think this way?
You know what? I was not at all surprised, because I understand that being a child of Holocaust survivors has not only affected me physically, because I think my genetic makeup is different, but I understand that I look at life so differently.
How do you think the mindset we've described right now, how did it shape the way you parent your sons?
I actually wanted them to be very independent. I was a single parent most of their lives, especially started in early teenagehood for them. And I wanted to make sure that they were very independent and capable and could make decisions for themselves. So I tried not to overmother them. For example, my oldest son went away 4 months to Europe when he was in his early 20s, and he went with a younger cousin. My sister-in-law is not a survivor's child, and she was calling them every single day, because when I went to Europe, there was no access to communication, but they had internet and everything. So every day she was following where they were going. And my older son must have thought that that's the way he should react. So he was calling me every single day, until I finally had to say to him, don't call me. You're fine. This is your life experience. Call me once a week. Tell me you're alive and go do it.
All right. You know what's astonishing about that? You wanted your sons to be independent. My mother, who was a Holocaust survivor of Auschwitz, wanted to ensure that I would never be independent. It was all of the, she had to protect me at all times. She walked me to school in grade 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had not decided to walk home on my own one day, she would have been walking me to work at CJAD Radio as a talk show. It was just, everything you can think of was literally the opposite of what you just described. I don't know how to ride a bike. I don't have a driver's license. I don't know how to drive a car. I don't know how to skate. I was going to go skate. And she said, okay, if you want to go skate, and you would fall on the floor and your brains on the ice and red seeping into the ice. And of course, the second as a kid, I heard that was it.
What a visual.
So it was like she was totally exactly the opposite of overprotective. And what tweaked it for me when you just said your son was calling you from Europe every day. I mean, if I were an hour late coming, never mind Europe, Montreal to Montreal. If I were an hour late, she'd call the police. So
I understand. It's the other extreme. It's the other extreme of the same phobia.
it might be because your memory was of like your father's experience was he was a teenager and he had to use his wits to survive, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. So maybe my mother didn't think I would have the wits to survive. So in order to overcome that, she decided that she would protect me at all times. But it really, I think what this proves is that the Holocaust for second gen affected us, but affected us quite differently. When you were, as a child of second gen, when you were thinking of that you might one day need to hide, did this lead to panic attacks?
Yes, actually, I started seeing a therapist when I was a young mother. When I saw a movie about a nuclear war in America, I think it was called The Day After. And it affected me so powerfully that the next morning I woke up and I found myself in the corner of my living room. I felt like the insides of me were kind of seeping out. I was just absolutely terrified because I think my worst nightmare, I just witnessed it on the screen. But above and beyond that, I'm very personable. I love speaking to people. I like to think the best of people unless they show me that they're not who I hope they will be. But I'm exceptionally nice to my neighbors, and I'm even more nice to my non-Jewish neighbors. And I know that part of the reason I do that is that I'm hoping that someone will give me a shelter if the Holocaust comes back.
Again, it's remarkable. I'm glad we're doing this podcast to find out the various different reactions. You brought up the subject of nuclear war. I was a young child and I thought the prospect of nuclear war was wonderful. You never have to say goodbye to anybody. You don't lose anyone. 1 minute you're there, next minute you're not there. I felt that a great relief because what I was most worried about my entire life was what if something happens to my mother? Like, who's going to take care of me? So nuclear war seemed like
a gift.
Like a gift. The other thing is like, I'm wondering if I'm even sane, like you mentioned that you like to think the best of people. Absolutely. That's so strange to my way of upbringing. My mother was very clear. You have to think of worst of people. All people are terrible. And every now and then you will find an exception. I thought that, and of course, whatever house we grew up in, right, Barbara, that's what we believed was normal. You in your house, me in my house. And
yeah, I was very blessed in that sense because my parents were very joyful, although there was always an enormous amount of sadness underneath. I think no matter if your parents spoke about it, if they never talked about it, if they lived it every minute, if they never wanted to talk about it again, if they were happy, sad, or miserable, it didn't matter. There was, I think everyone who was a second generation felt that there was something underneath, like there was always an underlying pain, sadness, terror, fear. And I'm sure we all felt that. But my father was a remarkable man. He had lost everyone in his family and he was alone. And he used to say to us, I don't trust the generation. I don't think I could ever forgive my generation of Germans or Ukrainians or the Poles. But he says the sins of the fathers should not be placed on the shoulders of their children. And I thought that was quite remarkable from a Holocaust survivor's point of view.
That's very true. How do you explain this kind of constant underlying fear that we have as second generation? How do you explain it to people who don't have it?
I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can explain fear to someone. I don't think that you can understand the instinctive terror of knowing that anti-Semitism is on the rise and what could come of it. It is, I think it's impossible for anyone to understand unless they themselves have been in some kind of survival mode situation or their families have been.
Now, some people have seen parallels between your mindset and what people forced to hide today, like undocumented immigrants in the United States, what they might experience. Do you see any parallel there?
Yes, I do. But again, when you're talking about the largest purposeful genocide of any generation in history, I think it was done so systematically that Jews didn't have an option of going to another country and trying to hide. There was no place to go. So I don't know that I mean, I certainly feel sympathy for people who are trying to better their lives, trying to come into another country and working really hard. And most immigrants come in and work like dogs in order to get the American dream or the Canadian dream. I mean, most people are not going to be out there trying to be an Islamic cell or things like that. And they come in particularly for the, purpose of terrorism. So I really do empathize with them, but I don't make that connection to any great degree. Do you?
No, I don't make the connection at all. I think that was a very unique experience where there was absolutely nowhere you could turn to. Undocumented immigrants have all kinds of volunteers who want to help them. Jews had absolutely nothing, not the neighbor to the left, the right, nobody, no friends whatsoever. And that was very different. Getting back to daily life, you said that there's an underlying anxiety that never goes away. And I agree with you 100%. How does that show up in your day-to-day life?
Well, I was actually had to take off some time from the work that I was doing because I kind of had a meltdown. And when I had a psychiatric analysis, I had to be reviewed by a psychiatrist, which I'd never done. And he diagnosed me with GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. And when I told all my friends, many of whom are Holocaust survivors' children, that I have GAD and explained what the general anxiety disorder, and they said, well, who doesn't have GAD? We all have GAD. And I think part of that is, again, on a cellular level, because it is genetically passed down, unfortunately. But a lot of us do suffer from that kind of anxiety, that angst that's always there.
Yes, there's no question. It's always there. It never goes away. How would you describe your emotional responses going from 0 to 100 in 12 seconds?
Well, I was putting it down to menopause, but I know my menopause didn't start when I was in my 20s. So I'm going to, again, I know, and I'm going to be very politically incorrect here by talking about politics, but when Trump nominated himself to run for the Republican Party nomination in 2015, 14 or whatever, and I looked at my husband and I said, oh my God, this is the beginning of Hitler. Hitler's coming. And this is what's going to happen. This man is a megalomaniac. He's going to create a tyranny. The world will never be the same. He's going to destroy democracy. And you just watch what's going to happen. And everyone's like, no, no, no. It was kind of nice to pat myself on the back when he won. But on the flip side of that, I have been terrified of what he is capable of doing, because we know through history, I mean, if you don't learn through history, you never learn.
That's true. But you mentioned before that during the Holocaust, the Jews had nowhere to hide. After 1948, there's Israel. There are many people who are saying that far from Trump being Hitler, he's the only president who stood up when the going was really tough for Israel. What would your reaction be to that?
Well, now we're in 2025. And I still think, and this is just my own personal opinion as a Canadian, that the man is a narcissistic lunatic, but he's our narcissistic lunatic right now.
Yeah, that's very well put.
Chosen for What is brought to you by the Foundation for Genocide Education. To learn more or to make a donation, head to gened.org. You'll find the link in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast.
How aware are you of passing on these trauma responses down to your children and grandchildren?
Well, I don't know if you're aware, but I do Holocaust presentations for the last 3 years for the Foundation for Genocide Education. And I go to high schools in and around the Ottawa and Montreal regions. I speak in French or English, and I bring my mom's story. She was a hidden child during the Holocaust. Her story is quite fascinating. I bring her story and a bit of my dad's to high school students, and I wanted my children to see that. I wanted my grandson to see that. And in fact, my grandson and my older son just joined me and my sister's family on a legacy trip to Poland. And when I heard that my kids were interested in coming, I booked the tickets the next day. I could not wait to have an opportunity to share my history with my grandson and my son.
They had the enthusiasm. It's not a matter that they weren't interested.
I told them I wanted to go. Yeah, I told them I wanted to go. And my 14-year-old grandson, Noah, turned to me and said, Bubby, I want to go. And I'm like, you want to go? And then my son said to me, yeah, I want to go. And I'm like, you want to go? I'm going. So the next day we're all booked.
Perfect. Now, what are some of the ways you've adapted your behavior to reflect this inherited vigilance?
Let me think. How am I inherently vigilant? Well, I find that now I have become quite loud and outspoken in my feelings about anti-Semitism. I am proud. I am no longer afraid. For many, many years, I was afraid actually even to be happy because I thought there was a correlation between my being happy and something immediately horrible happening afterwards. And I don't know if I've never spoken about this particular way of dealing with my life with other Holocaust survivors. Perhaps it's normal, but it took me years to understand that crap happens. You might as well just enjoy yourself when you can, and that's going to come anyway. So I have really tried so hard to realize that life is for the living, that we have to move forward, that every day I wake up and I choose to be positive. I don't want to walk around in tears, but I will stand up for who I am and what I believe in. I write letters. I add my name to surveys. I listen to honest reporting every day, and I take action. I write letters to my councilmen. I go to rallies, and I do these presentations because I said to myself, what does a middle-aged, okay, now maybe not so middle-aged, a retired banker,
Middle-aged for eternity.
we'll just say middle-aged. What does a middle-aged retired banker have to offer to maybe just give one ray of hope to all the hate in the world? And this was my way of bringing some hope to the world, and I hope it makes some kind of impact.
What's your take on another little issue we've inherited? Ability, catastrophization. In other words, if something happens and it could be something that's a little bit of a problem, not a problem at all, or a major problem. As far as I'm concerned, it can't possibly not be a problem, can't possibly be a small problem. Obviously, it's the worst possible thing. This is so normal to me, I don't even give it a second thought. You recognize any of that?
Yeah, I call the solution therapy.
Because I've had about 25.
I'm probably right behind you, so there you go. And thank God that I have, because I have, you have to make a choice that the world is not going to be this horrifying place. And right now, I'm sure that you, along with most other Jews, are afraid of what's going on in the world today and afraid of what's coming. It's a really scary place to be right now, though. The world is scary.
And I think the people who say, relax, there's nothing to be scared of, there's no problem, look around you. Those people aren't talking anymore because there's a lot of problems around, and the same kinds of the echoes of what they said about Jews in the 30s is what they're saying about Jews all over Twitter, all over the internet on a nonstop basis. I mean, did you ever think that there'd be somebody hacked into a Sesame Street puppet and say, kill the Jews? Did you ever think you would see those three words, not on an obscure, fringe, insane, lunatic website, but right there in print on Twitter? Oh, it was the puppet who said it. Oh, they didn't really. That's not what they really said. And everybody moves onward now. Did you ever believe that could possibly happen? It's like the same blood libel of centuries and centuries ago. It's just updated. And as a child of survivors, I'm very, very aware of it. And I have this horrible thing to say and this horrible thing to confess. I told you that the thing that worried me most my entire life is something would happen to my mother and then who would take care of me. And I was obviously devastated when she passed away. Now, I don't know what I would do, like how I would handle calming her down or dealing with her to explain this. Because seeing this kind of stuff, it's almost, I feel like glad that she's no longer here to have to face this absolute horror.
Oh my God, Tommy, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss, but you've just pushed such a button. My whole body just went zing. The first thing I said after October 7th is, thank God my parents are dead. Thank God my parents are dead. They should never have lived to see this happening again in the world. That was the first thing I had to say. And I know all my friends who are second generations of survivors all said the same thing.
Isn't that unspeakably horrific that a thought like that would occur to us? That's why I said it's like a confession. Who says things like that? Who says things about that?
Yes, that you wish your parents dead.
Yeah. What a horrific, horrific thing to say. There's been a lot of interesting dynamics for second generation. But one of the things I found, and this is what I hold on to, is there's also the idea of inheriting trauma. Yes, we know that. And inheriting resilience as well. Because I can tell you during COVID, everybody said, oh, COVID is the end of the world. You can't go out. You can't do this. And I said, what are people what are people talking about? I don't know if I'm going to order Chinese or sushi tonight. I don't know what's going to be on Netflix this evening. That's what I'm worried about. Not if I have food tomorrow, if I'm going to be slaughtered tomorrow. How can you compare this? Don't even call this trauma. You can't even say that word in terms of comparing what their parents. So to me, I think part of that was resilience. This is Gornish. This is nothing. This is easy to deal with. So I think that resilience, tell me about how you feel about inheriting the resilience through your parents' struggle.
I think that you're absolutely right, Tommy. I think that we have learned, because we've had to be strong, not only for ourselves, but also for our parents. As strong as our parents were, they needed our strength to get through their lives as well. I know that I am incredibly resilient and strong, but it also is a double-edged sword. Because the flip side of that is, just like you said, well, what kind of trauma is this? It's just COVID. It's not a big deal. I still have food. I can do anything. Our problems can never be considered as serious as the Holocaust. So we minimize our own problems, and our boo-boos are our boo-boos to own and to deal with. And yet I remember many years ago having a huge issue, and I was in a horrible place. I went to see my GP. He was lovely, said to me, why don't you go on antidepressants? You try a low dose and you're going to feel much better. You'll be able to think clearly and make decisions that are good for you. And I looked at him in horror and I'm like, oh, I'm not going on antidepressants. My father went through a war and he didn't take antidepressants. I mean, for my little baby problems, it's not the Holocaust. And he looked at me and says, hello, says, if your father had antidepressants, don't you think he would have taken them? And I'm like, oh no, not my fault. I mean, we think have no choice but to constantly minimize our own issues.
Yes, and you know what? And we did it even when we were children. Whatever problem you had, how does that compare to what they went through as a child? You wanted to undo the Holocaust, which of course is impossible. And what I think, I don't know if this was true in your case, what I also had to do, because these people had gone through all this terrible stuff, I was obligated to make them happy and to parent them, which is, no, as a child, your job is to be a child. But I didn't think so. I said, I have to parent them. I have to make sure that they're okay. I have to take care of them, which is not what a child should be thinking about a parent.
And again, as you said, you went through a totally different childhood than I did with your parents, but yet we reacted in exactly the same way. My sister and I would never, once I remember, and I'll give a shout out to Junior Bootery if they still exist. I was in at the Coast St. Luke Shopping Center with my mom. I must have been 12. We walked past some shoes in the window of Junior Bootery, and my mom said to me, oh, these are really cute. Do you like these? And I'm like, oh, are you crazy? And the look on her face was so devastating to me. That was the last mean thing I ever said to my mother. I never rebelled during childhood. I was the perfect teenager. I always did the right thing, and it was always about keeping my parents had gone through enough pain. I had to make sure they had no more pain.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to add to any of it.
No.
Barbara, thank you so much for sharing these personal and deeply meaningful reflections with us. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to follow or subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family so we can continue to spread the word for the Foundation for Genocide Education. I'm Tommy Schnurmacher. Until next time.